most exclusive restaurant in Manhattan on the busiest night of the year, and the one thing all her money could not buy was a single empty chair. Rachel Carter, billionaire chief executive, 3 times on the cover of the country's biggest business magazine, stood in the lobby of La Maison Elise on New Year's Eve and was told politely that there was no table for her. Around her, champagne glasses clinked, couples leaned close, families laughed over shared plates. Everyone in the room had somewhere to be and someone to hold. She turned toward the door, and that was when a movement caught her eye. A black man at a corner table near the window rose from his seat. Beside him, a little girl with braided hair looked up. He met Rachel's gaze and waved her over, a stranger inviting her to stay when the whole city had no room for her. Why would a man with nothing to gain offer his table to the loneliest rich woman in New York, and what would it cost them both? Before we begin, take a second and let us know in the comments where you're watching from tonight. 3 hours earlier, Rachel Carter had been on a conference call with investors in 3 cities on 3 continents at once. She had closed a $2 billion acquisition without once raising her voice. Her name commanded silence in boardrooms across 4 continents. Now she stood in the lobby of the most coveted dining room in Manhattan and was being told that none of it mattered. "Perhaps you didn't hear me," Rachel said, keeping her voice level. "I'll pay triple, 4 times, name your number." The maitre, a slender man with silver at his temples and an apologetic smile, shook his head. "I understand, Miss Carter, and I truly wish I could help, but every table is reserved." It's New Year's Eve. She knew that. Of course she knew that. What she had not anticipated was that the restaurant where she had hosted a dozen business dinners, where the staff knew the exact temperature she preferred her sparkling water, would have no room for her on the one night she arrived alone. Her assistant, Meredith, had left that afternoon to catch a flight home to Chicago. Her driver had asked for the holiday off weeks ago, and Rachel had approved it without a second thought. She had a penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows over the park, a wine collection worth more than most people's houses, and not one person expecting her anywhere, so she had driven herself for the first time in years, gotten behind the wheel of a sleek black car she barely remembered buying, and threaded through the holiday traffic like any ordinary person. She had told herself it was an adventure, a change of pace. She had not told herself it was loneliness. That word did not exist in her vocabulary. "I see," Rachel said. Her reflection stared back from the polished marble, immaculate makeup, a charcoal cashmere coat that cost more than most people earned in a month, perfect posture. "Thank you for your time." She turned and walked toward the exit, her heels clicking against the floor with measured precision. Around her the room hummed with life. A couple in their 60s held hands across a candlelit table. A young family laughed over pasta. A group of friends raised their glasses in a toast, their faces bright with the promise of midnight. She was surrounded by warmth and utterly alone. The thought surfaced before she could stop it, and she pushed it back down with practiced efficiency. She had built a company from nothing. She answered to no one and needed no one, and yet when she reached the door she allowed herself one last glance back. A mistake. Because that was the moment she saw him. Carlos Brooks had not planned to come here tonight. 3 years ago this restaurant had been his and Naomi's place. Not for ordinary dinners, they could never have afforded that, but for the moments that mattered. Their 5th anniversary. The night they learned she was pregnant with Sophia. The New Year's Eve when they would dress up, splurge on the tasting menu, and pretend for one evening that they were the kind of people who did this all the time. The last time they had come here together, Naomi had been in remission. They had toasted with champagne and hope, believing the worst was behind them. 4 months later she was gone. He had avoided the place ever since. Too many ghosts, too much of her in every corner. But Sophia had asked. His 7-year-old daughter, who remembered her mother only in fragments, a laugh, a lullaby, the smell of lavender lotion, had looked up at him last week with those big brown eyes and said, "Daddy, can we go to Mommy's special restaurant?" So she knows we still remember her. How could he say no? So there they were at a corner table, by the window, the same spot where he and Naomi had always sat. Sophia wore her favorite purple dress, the one with tiny silver stars. In her lap she held a drawing she had made that afternoon, 3 stick figures holding hands. Carlos on the left, Sophia in the middle, and Naomi floating on a cloud above them with a halo of yellow crayon around her head. "Daddy, look," Sophia said, pointing across the room. "That lady is sad." Carlos followed her gaze. Near the entrance, a woman in an expensive coat was speaking with the maitre d'. Even from a distance, he could read the tension in her shoulders, the careful control in her face. He recognized her vaguely, one of those faces from the magazine covers at the grocery checkout. "Maybe she's just tired, sweetheart." Sophia shook her head, braids swinging. "No, she's sad. The kind of sad where you smile but your eyes don't." Carlos watched the woman turn for the door. Her posture was perfect, her stride confident. But Sophia was right. There was something hollow in the way she moved, something he recognized, because he had perfected that same walk himself in the months after Naomi died. The appearance of composure while everything inside was coming apart. "She doesn't have anyone," Sophia said softly. "Nobody's waiting for her." The words hit Carlos harder than they should have. He looked at the empty chair beside him, the one he still couldn't bring himself to fill, and then back at the woman retreating toward the cold Manhattan night. Naomi would have done something. His wife had never been able to walk past a person in pain without stopping. She used to joke that her heart had no off switch. Before he could talk himself out of it, Carlos stood up. Rachel's hand was on the door when she heard it, a small voice cutting through the noise. "Excuse me, lady," she turned. The little girl with the braided hair was waving at her, standing up on her chair to be seen above the crowd. Beside her, the man Rachel had noticed earlier was on his feet, one hand resting gently on his daughter's shoulder. "We have an extra chair," the girl called. "You can sit with us." The matron looked mortified. "Miss Carter, I'm so sorry, I can ask them to." "No," Rachel heard herself say. "It's fine." She did not know why she said it. Every instinct told her to decline gracefully and leave. She was Rachel Carter. She did not accept charity from strangers. She did not sit at other people's tables like some lost soul in need of rescue. But the little girl was still smiling at her, and the man, her father, wore an expression that held no pity and no recognition of who Rachel was or what she was worth. Just a quiet steadiness, as if he understood something about her she had never said aloud. She walked toward their table. "I'm Carlos," the man said, extending his hand. His grip was warm and firm. "This is my daughter, Sophia." "I'm 7, Sophia announced. "And you're really pretty. Are you a princess?" Despite herself, Rachel felt her mouth curve into something close to a smile. "No, I'm not a princess. That's okay. Princesses are boring anyway. They just wait in towers. You look like someone who does stuff." Carlos pulled out the chair across from him. "Please, sit." Rachel hesitated. She could still leave. She could thank them, make an excuse, and walk out into the night where no one would see her come undone. She could go home to her empty penthouse, pour a glass of wine, and pretend the evening had never happened. Or she could sit down. She thought of the conference call and the billions of dollars, the investors hanging on her every word. She thought of Meredith flying home to a family that missed her, her driver spending the holiday with people who loved him. She thought of every New Year's Eve for the past decade, spent at parties where everyone wanted something, and she was never just Rachel, but always the chief executive, the billionaire, the brand. She sat down. "Thank you," she said. The words felt strange in her mouth. When was the last time she had thanked someone and truly meant it? Sophia beamed. Carlos flagged down a waiter. "Another menu, please." And just like that, Rachel Carter, who ran boardrooms and commanded empires, found herself at a tiny table with a stranger and his 7-year-old daughter, with no agenda, no leverage, no role to play. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she had no idea what came next. The realization should have terrified her. Instead, something in her chest loosened. Just a little, just enough to breathe. The dinner that followed was unlike anything Rachel had experienced in years. She was used to meals as transactions. Every lunch, every dinner, every shared glass of wine came with an agenda. Investors wanted access, competitors wanted information, everyone wanted something. But Carlos asked her nothing about her company. He did not mention her net worth or her latest deal. When Sophia asked what Rachel did for work, Carlos simply said, "She helps run a big business," and left it there. Instead, they talked about small things. Sophia's favorite subject in school, which was art, because math was too bossy with all its rules. The snow that was supposed to fall before midnight. The best flavor of ice cream, so Sophia insisted on strawberry. Carlos argued for butter pecan. Rachel admitted she could not remember the last time she had eaten ice cream at all. "That's the saddest thing I ever heard," Sophia declared, eyes wide. "Daddy, we have to fix this." Carlos smiled, the first real smile Rachel had seen from him. It transformed his face, softened the careful reserve he wore like armor. "Maybe we can get dessert later." Rachel found herself watching them, studying the easy rhythm between them. The way Carlos cut Sophia's food into smaller pieces without being asked. The way Sophia reached for his hand when she laughed, as if joy were something meant to be shared through touch. The way he listened when she spoke, giving her his whole attention, as if a 7-year-old's observations mattered as much as any boardroom presentation. This was what a family looked like. Not the cold silence of Rachel's childhood, where achievement was expected and affection was rationed. Not the performed warmth of holiday parties, where everyone smiled for cameras and went home to separate lives. This was real. "You're staring," Sophia said suddenly, catching her off guard. "Do I have food on my face?" "No. I'm sorry. I was just thinking." "About what?" Rachel searched for an answer that would not sound strange to a child. "About how nice this is, having dinner with you." The girl beamed. "See, Daddy, I told you she was nice. You were worried for nothing." Carlos's expression flickered with something Rachel could not quite read. I wasn't worried. You made your serious face when she sat down, the one you make when you're thinking too hard. Sophia, there was a gentle warning in his voice and also amusement. It's okay, Rachel said. I'd be cautious too if a stranger joined my table. She met Carlos's eyes. Thank you for letting me stay. You didn't have to do that. Carlos held her gaze a moment. Everyone deserves somewhere to be on New Year's Eve. The words were simple, but they landed somewhere deep in her chest. Before she could answer, Sophia tugged her sleeve. Do you have pets? I want a dog, but Daddy says our apartment is too small. Do you have a big apartment? You could get one of those fluffy ones that look like clouds. Rachel almost laughed. I don't have any pets. Why not? I travel a lot for work. I wouldn't have time to take care of them properly. Sophia considered this with the gravity of a judge weighing evidence. That's sad, but at least you're honest about it. Some people get pets and then ignore them, and that's worse. She turned back with a new question. What's your favorite color? Rachel blinked. No one had asked her that in decades. Ocean blue, she said finally, the color of the sea on a calm day. That's pretty. Mine is purple, obviously. Sophia gestured at her dress. Then her face turned thoughtful. Do you cry a lot? Sophia, Carlos said, his tone sharper. That's personal. It's okay. Rachel looked at the little girl's open, curious face and felt something crack inside her. No, I don't cry much. Sometimes I want to, but I can't. Sophia nodded solemnly. Mommy used to say that grown-ups who don't cry are holding their sadness inside. She said if you don't let it out, it stays stuck in your chest forever. Carlos's jaw tightened, and Rachel saw him look away. But Sophia went on matter-of-fact. Mommy cried sometimes. She said it was like rain for the heart. It washes things clean. Rachel did not know what to say. She looked at Carlos, at the grief still visible in the lines around his eyes, and then back at this remarkable child who spoke about her dead mother with such simple wisdom. Your mother sounds like she was very wise, Rachel said softly. She was, Carlos said quietly. She really was. When midnight came, the restaurant erupted. Corks popped, strangers embraced. A jazz band somewhere struck up the opening notes of the old song about old acquaintance. Sophia stood on her chair and threw her arms around Carlos's neck. Happy New Year, Daddy. He held her tight. Eyes closed, and Rachel saw something raw flash across his face, grief and love tangled so tightly they had become the same thing. Then Sophia turned to her. Happy New Year, Miss Rachel. Before Rachel could react, small arms wrapped around her shoulders, a hug brief and fierce, the way only a child hugs without reservation, without calculation. When Sophia pulled back, Rachel's throat felt tight. Happy New Year, she managed. Carlos reached his hand across the table. Happy New Year, Rachel. She took it. His palm was warm, his grip steady. And for one suspended moment, as the old year died and the new one began, Rachel Carter felt something she had not felt in decades. Hope. She told herself it was a one-time thing. A strange, beautiful accident that could not happen again. But 3 days into January, she found herself walking through the park on her lunch break, something she never did, and there they were. Carlos pushing Sophia on a swing, both bundled against the cold, their laughter carrying across the frozen air. Sophia spotted her first. Miss Rachel. There was no graceful way to pretend she hadn't seen them, and if she was honest with herself, something she was trying to do more often she didn't want to. Come, push me. Sophia hopped off the swing. Daddy's arms are getting tired, and somehow Rachel Carter, who had meetings to attend and emails to answer and an empire to run, spent the next hour in a playground pushing a 7-year-old higher and higher into the cold blue sky and learning the proper way to pack a snowball. Her cashmere coat got wet at the cuffs. Her careful hairstyle came loose. At one point, she slipped on a patch of ice and went down on one knee, and instead of the embarrassment she expected, she found herself laughing, actually laughing. While a child pelted her gently with snow, and Carlos watched from the bench with an expression she would think about for days. When she finally checked her phone, she had missed 3 calls from her office, and for the first time in her adult life, she did not care. It became a pattern, coffee runs that accidentally lined up with Carlos's schedule. Weekend afternoons at the park when Sophia had no school. Dinners that started as casual and became something Rachel looked forward to all week. She learned about him in pieces. That he worked as an education consultant for community programs, helping at-risk young people find paths to college and careers. That he had met Naomi in graduate school when they were both broke and idealistic and certain they could change the world. That after Naomi died, he had thought about moving home to Atlanta, where his mother lived. But Sophia had begged to stay in the city where her memories of her mother still lived. He did not ask much about Rachel's past, but he listened when she offered fragments. The childhood in Connecticut, all manicured lawns and absent parents. A father who measured love in report cards and a mother who was always somewhere else, on a board, on a plane, on a phone. Rachel had learned early that the surest way to be noticed was to achieve something, and so she had achieved and achieved and achieved, until the achieving was all that was left of her. And somewhere along the way she had forgotten there had ever been a girl underneath it who simply wanted someone to ask about her day. The company she had built from a small startup into a global giant. The way success had become a kind of trap, golden handcuffs she had fastened around her own wrists. "Do you regret it?" he asked one evening as Sophia napped on the couch and they sat in his small kitchen drinking tea. "Building what you built?" Rachel considered the question. "I regret what it cost me, but I don't know if I could have been anyone else." Carlos nodded slowly. "I used to think that about grief, that it had to consume everything, that there was no room for anything else." He looked toward the living room, where Sophia slept with her arm around a stuffed elephant. "Now I think maybe there's room, if I'm brave enough to make it." The first time Rachel overstepped, she didn't even realize she was doing it. Sophia had mentioned wanting art supplies, the really good kind, not the ones from the regular store. That weekend, Rachel showed up at Carlos's apartment with a professional set worth more than $500. Brushes made from imported sable, pigments used by gallery artists, a wooden case with brass hinges. Sophia's eyes went wide. "For me, every artist needs proper tools," Rachel said, pleased with herself, but Carlos's expression had gone carefully neutral. "That's very generous, Rachel." "Sophia, what do you say?" "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Sophia threw her arms around Rachel's then began examining each brush like a sacred artifact. Later, when Sophia was absorbed in her new treasures, Carlos pulled Rachel aside. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to." She said she wanted better supplies, and "I happen to know a place." "Rachel," his voice was gentle but firm, "that set costs more than my grocery budget for 2 months. I looked it up." She blinked. "I didn't think about the price. I just wanted her to have something nice. I know, and I appreciate the thought, but Sophia doesn't need expensive things. She needs consistency, presence, things that can't be bought." The words stung more than they should have. Rachel nodded stiffly. "Of course, I'm sorry." Carlos softened. "I'm not angry. Just let's keep things simple. We're not a project to be funded. We're just people," she agreed. She meant it, but old habits were harder to break than she had expected. When Carlos mentioned that funding for one of his programs had been cut, Rachel casually offered to cover the shortfall. When Sophia's school sent home a flyer about an elite art camp, Rachel quietly researched the application and began drafting a recommendation letter. When Carlos's laptop died mid-project, a new one arrived at his door the next day with a note, just returning the favor for New Year's Eve. Each gesture came from a good place. Each one pushed Carlos further away. "I can't accept this," he said, standing in his doorway with the box still sealed. "Rachel, this is a $3,000 computer. It's a tool for your work. You help kids find futures. You shouldn't be held back by outdated equipment. That's not the point." His jaw tightened. "The point is that I didn't ask for this. I don't need you to solve my problems. I'm not trying to solve anything. I just want to help. Help." The word came out flat. "Every time you help, it feels like you're trying to fix us. Like we're broken and you're the one with the tools." Rachel felt heat rise to her cheeks. "That's not fair. I care about you, both of you, then care about us by being here. Not by writing checks or sending gifts or pulling strings." Carlos ran a hand over his face, exhaustion replacing the anger. "I've spent my whole life proving I don't need handouts. I've worked for everything I have. When you swoop in with your money and your connections, it makes me feel like none of that matters. Like I'm not enough on my own." The silence between them stretched tight as a wire. "I didn't know," Rachel said quietly. "I didn't think about how it would feel to you. I only thought about what I could give." Carlos's expression shifted into something like recognition. "But that's the problem. You're so used to giving things that you don't know how to just be." She had no answer because he was right. Rachel tried to change. She stopped offering money, stopped buying gifts, stopped solving problems that weren't hers to solve. She learned to sit with Sophia and simply color without suggesting better techniques or better paper. She learned to listen to Carlos talk about his work without proposing funding solutions or corporate partnerships. It was harder than any negotiation she had ever conducted. Every instinct screamed at her to contribute, to add value, to justify her presence with something tangible. Sitting still felt like failure. But slowly something shifted. One evening Carlos looked at her across the kitchen table, the same table where they had shared a dozen meals by now, and said, "This is nice. Just this. Just being here." And Rachel realized that for the first time in her life she was learning that presence was enough. The photograph appeared on a gossip site in early March. Rachel and Carlos at the park, Sophia between them, all three laughing at something off camera. The headline called it a tech billionaire's secret romance. The speculation was predictable: who Carlos was, whether the child was Rachel's, whether this was a scandal in the making. And then a few threads turned ugly, questioning why a woman like Rachel would be seen with a black man from Brooklyn, using language that turned Rachel's stomach when she read it. She had her communications team scrub the article within hours and threatened legal action against the photographer. But the damage was done. Carlos withdrew. Not dramatically. He still answered her texts, still agreed to see her, but something had shifted behind his eyes. A weariness that had not been there before. "I don't want Sophia dragged into your world," he said one night after the girl had gone to bed. "She's been through enough. I know. I'm handling it." "You can't handle everything, Rachel. That's what I keep trying to tell you. Some things just have to be weathered." She wanted to argue, wanted to explain that she could protect them, that her resources could build walls around this fragile thing they were making. But she saw the look on his face and held her tongue. For once she listened instead of acting. It wasn't enough. The school called Carlos in April. Sophia's application for a prestigious art scholarship, one he had never submitted, had been flagged for review. The admissions director wanted to discuss the glowing recommendation letter that had come with it. A letter signed by Rachel Carter. Carlos called her that night. His voice was ice. "You went behind my back. I was trying to help. The school has the best art program in the city. And Sophia has so much talent. I said no. I told you I didn't want your connections involved in her education. You agreed. You looked me in the eye and agreed. I know. But I thought if you just saw what was possible. You thought you knew better." The words were sharp as broken glass. "That's what this is really about, isn't it? You think your money, your influence, gives you the right to make decisions for us, like we're children who don't know what's good for them." "Carlos, please let me explain." "Explain what? That you can't help yourself? That old habits die hard?" His laugh was bitter. "I've heard that before. From people who always thought they knew better than the single black father from Brooklyn. I expected it from them. I didn't expect it from you." Rachel felt tears prick her eyes. When had she last cried? She could not remember. "I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But I did it because I care. That's the worst part." His voice cracked. "I know you care. But caring isn't enough if you can't respect a boundary, if you can't trust me to know what's right for my own daughter." The silence stretched between them, vast as an ocean. "I need time," he finally said. "And I need you to stay away from Sophia. She's already asking about you. I don't want her hurt worse. Just give her space, please." The line went dead. Rachel sat in her penthouse, surrounded by everything money could buy, and felt the foundation of something precious crumble beneath her. She had done this with the best intentions in the world, and she had done exactly what she always did. Tried to control, tried to fix, tried to prove her worth through action rather than simply being. And now the only two people who had ever seen her as more than a chief executive, more than a brand, were slipping away. She had built a career on knowing what people needed, on anticipating problems and solving them before they grew. But when it came to the thing that mattered most, real human connection, she had failed in the most fundamental way. She had treated love like a transaction, and now she was paying for it. The weeks that followed were the longest of Rachel's life. She did not call, she did not text, she did not drive past his apartment, or show up at the park where Sophia liked to swing. He had asked for space, and for once in her life she would give someone exactly what they asked for instead of what she thought they needed. But the silence was deafening. She threw herself into work the way she always did when life became too complicated to bear. Board meetings, acquisitions, the endless machinery of empire. Her executives noticed nothing different. Her shareholders saw the same decisive leader they had always trusted. The mask held. At night, though, the questions came. If she could not use her money, her connections, her ability to fix things, what was left? Who was Rachel Carter without the power to solve? She had built her entire identity around being useful, being the one with the answers. Strip that away, and what remained? The question haunted her through sleepless nights and distracted days, and slowly, painfully, an answer began to take shape. She started volunteering. Not at Carlos's programs. She would not insert herself into his world uninvited. Instead, she found a youth literacy center in Queens, a struggling place with outdated books and dedicated staff who could barely pay themselves a living wage. She showed up on a Tuesday evening in jeans and a sweater instead of her usual designer armor and asked if they needed help. The director, a tired woman named Martha who had clearly never heard of Rachel Carter, handed her a stack of picture books and pointed her toward a circle of fidgeting 6-year-olds. "Read to them, keep them engaged. Good luck." No strategic plan, no funding proposal, just a plastic chair, a worn copy of a children's book, and 8 pairs of skeptical eyes. Rachel was terrible at it. She read too fast. She forgot to show the pictures. She did not know how to do the funny voices. One boy fell asleep. A girl with pink barrettes informed her that the last volunteer was way better at this. But she came back the next week, and the week after that. She learned to slow down, to let the children interrupt with questions, to laugh when she stumbled over a word and let them correct her. She learned that showing up was its own kind of gift, one that could not be outsourced or purchased. She learned finally what Carlos had been trying to tell her all along. The girl with the pink barrettes was named Destiny, and by the 4th week she had appointed herself Rachel's personal critic. "You still read too fast," Destiny told her, arms crossed, "and you skipped the part where the monster roars. You have to roar or it doesn't count." So the next week, Rachel roared, right there in a folding chair in a drafty room in Queens, a woman whose signature moved markets baring her teeth and groveling like a storybook monster, and 8 children shrieked with delight, and Destiny finally grudgingly gave her a nod. It was the proudest Rachel had felt in longer than she could remember, and there was no headline, no shareholder, no camera anywhere to see it. That, she understood at last, was exactly the point. Carlos saw the change before he was ready to admit it. A mutual acquaintance mentioned spotting Rachel at the literacy center. A colleague shared an article about how the billionaire had been quietly volunteering for months. With no press coverage and no tax-deductible fanfare, he told himself it did not matter, people did not really change, but Sophia would not let him forget. "When is Miss Rachel coming back?" she asked at breakfast. "Is Miss Rachel mad at me?" she wondered at dinner. "I want to show Miss Rachel my new painting," she announced at bedtime, holding up a watercolor of a sunset she had made with the expensive brushes still sitting in their wooden case. Carlos did not know how to explain adult complications to a 7-year-old. He tried saying that sometimes friends need time apart. Sophia asked why. He tried saying that grown-ups make mistakes. Sophia asked if a mistake meant you couldn't be friends anymore. He had no good answer. One night in September, as Carlos tucked her in, Sophia handed him a new drawing and he felt his breath catch. 4 figures this time. Carlos on the left, tall and steady, Sophia in the middle, grinning in purple crayon, Naomi floating on her cloud above them, the same yellow halo she always drew, and beside Carlos holding his hand, a woman with brown hair and a blue dress. "That's Miss Rachel," Sophia said. "I put her next to you because she makes you smile. And Mommy's on the cloud so she can see that we're happy." Carlos stared at the drawing. His daughter had seen something he had been refusing to admit, that his resistance was not only about protecting Sophia, it was about protecting himself from hope, from the possibility of losing someone all over again. "Daddy," Sophia said, her voice small. "Mommy would want you to be happy, right?" He pulled her into a hug, blinking hard. "Yeah, baby." She would. That night, after Sophia was asleep, Carlos sat alone in the kitchen with the drawing spread before him. He thought about Naomi, really thought about her, not just the grief he had wrapped around her memory like a shield. She had loved fiercely and forgiven freely. She had believed people deserved second chances. She had told him once, near the end, that her only fear was not dying. It was that he would stop living. He had promised her he wouldn't, but he had. For 3 years he had hidden behind his role as Sophia's protector and convinced himself that keeping everyone at arm's length was the same as keeping his daughter safe. He had turned Naomi's memory into a wall instead of a window. Rachel had made real mistakes, but she was trying to change, not to win him back, but because she had finally understood something true about herself. He had watched her stumble toward that truth with the same stubbornness she probably brought to boardrooms. It was not graceful. It was not perfect, but it was real. The letter arrived on a grey October morning. Carlos recognized the handwriting at once, precise, elegant, unmistakably hers. He considered throwing it away unopened. Instead, he sat down at the kitchen table and read, "Carlos, I'm not writing to ask for another chance. I know I don't deserve one, and even if I did, that's not mine to ask for. I just wanted you to know that you were right about everything. I spent my whole life believing my worth came from what I could give. Money, solutions, success. You showed me that presence matters more. That listening is harder than fixing. That love is not a transaction. I'm still learning. I volunteer now at a literacy center in Queens. The children there don't care that I run a company. They care whether I remembered to do the funny voices. It's humbling in the best possible way. Thank you for New Year's Eve. Thank you for letting me sit at your table when I had nowhere else to go. Thank you for showing me what a family looks like. I will carry that gift with me always. Whatever happens, I hope you and Sophia find everything you deserve. Rachel." Carlos read the letter 3 times. Then he folded it carefully, placed it in his desk drawer and did nothing. But he found himself thinking about her at odd moments, wondering if she was still reading to those children, hoping she had learned to do the voices right. He called her in November. She didn't answer, so he left a message. "Rachel, it's Carlos. I got your letter. I'm not ready to. I don't know what I'm ready for. But Sophia asks about you, and I don't want her growing up thinking that people can't change or that mistakes are permanent. So maybe we could talk. Just talk, no promises." She called back the next day. They met for coffee at a neutral place, not their park, not their restaurant. Just 2 people at a small table trying to find their way back to honesty. "I'm not the same person I was in April," Rachel said. "I know that sounds like something people say, but I've been doing the work. The real kind. The kind that doesn't show up on a balance sheet." Carlos nodded slowly. I've been doing some work too, realizing I was using my grief as an excuse to keep everyone out, including people who might be worth letting in. They did not solve everything that day, but they started. 1 year later, New Year's Eve came around again. No exclusive Manhattan restaurant this time, no velvet ropes or champagne towers. Just Carlos's small Brooklyn apartment, the same one where Rachel had once dropped off a laptop she never should have bought. Sophia sprawled on the living room floor with her watercolors, working on a painting she refused to let anyone see until it was finished. Carlos stood at the stove stirring a pot of soup that had been his mother's recipe, and Rachel set the table. She was clumsy at it. The forks ended up on the wrong side, the napkins folded unevenly. But she was there doing something small and ordinary, and nobody was keeping score. On the shelf behind the couch, a framed photograph of Naomi smiled at the room. Rachel had asked Carlos about it once, early in their reconciliation, whether it bothered him to have her picture there while Rachel was present. She's part of this family, he had said simply. She always will be. You're not replacing anyone, you're just adding to the story. Now, as the clock ticked toward midnight, Sophia abandoned her painting and scrambled onto the couch between them. 10, 9, 8. Carlos reached for Rachel's hand. She took it. 7, 6, 5. Outside, fireworks began to crackle over the city. Inside, the apartment glowed warm and golden. 4, 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year! Sophia threw her arms around both of them at once, pulling them into a messy, laughing embrace, and Rachel Carter, who had spent decades measuring her worth in acquisitions and headlines and the cold certainty of control, felt something she had never expected to find. Enough, not because she had earned it, not because she had bought it, but because she had finally learned to simply be present, imperfect and uncertain, in a room with people who accepted her anyway. She did not know what the new year would bring. She did not know if this fragile, precious thing would last a month or a lifetime. But for the first time in her life, she did not need to know. The loneliest thing about having everything, she understood now, was believing you had to buy your way into every room, even the ones that would have opened for free, if you had only let yourself be seen empty-handed. A stranger and his little girl had waved her over on the coldest night of the year and asked for nothing at all, and that in the end had been worth more than every deal she ever closed. She just needed to be here, and she was.